Hey everyone, I'm out here in the garage and what we're going to be doing today is repainting a porch. So stay tuned. So if you're new to the channel, I just want to welcome you here and hopefully you'll consider subscribing if you like what you see. Also, check out DIY Apprentice on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I post lots of pictures and videos on those platforms before I post anything on YouTube. And occasionally I'll post things on those platforms I don't post on YouTube. Also, check out the website at DIYapprentice.com. And don't forget to hit the like button if you like this video. So back in the summer, I helped a relative out by repainting their porch. The porch really wasn't in that bad a shape. There were some issues with the high traffic areas, as you'll see coming up in this video. But we figured also the color needed to be changed on this porch, and we might as well go ahead and take advantage of the nice weather while we had it and get it done. So, let's get into it. Alright, so this is the porch we'll be repainting on this 100-year-old house. The plywood covering the porch hasn't been replaced in at least 40 years, and I'm not sure it's ever been replaced, but it's still in pretty good shape. I started off by simply sweeping the porch. Then I used compressed air to blow out the crevices along the siding and under the railing. I took a few minutes to examine the most damaged area of the porch and noticed that the paint lifted rather easily, and it was evident a cheaper wood filler had been used to fill the voids. After sweeping the porch along with the rubber boots I'm wearing, I also donned some goggles and chemical resistant gloves. To degloss and clean the porch, I use a TSP or trisodium phosphate substitute. The product's instructions provide several mixture and application options, so I chose to mix it 1-to-1 with water, then add a little bleach since this porch isn't heavily soiled. You may want to use genuine TSP, but I was trying to avoid using a lot of harsh chemicals on this project. Also, it's advisable to not allow this mixture to come in contact with raw wood. Fortunately, there wasn't much exposed plywood on this porch. I used a deck brush to scrub the porch and a smaller brush to scrub under and on the sides of the railings, since I needed to apply painter's tape to the sides of the railings later. After I finished scrubbing the porch, I let the solution sit for a few minutes, then I sprayed it off with water. By the way, there are no plants nearby or I would have first covered them with plastic. With this part finished, I let the porch dry for 24 hours before continuing. Alright, so it's the next day and I started by assessing whether I could quickly just sand off and level any flaking paint, or if I needed to be more aggressive and strip at least the high traffic areas down to bare wood. If you need to go to the extreme of stripping the whole porch, I found that multi-strip professional paint remover works pretty well. I used a variety of sandpapers on sanders and on a block on this job, going down as low as 35 or 40 grit. My progression through the grits was something like 40 for heavy removal in the high traffic areas, but I primarily used 60 or 80 grit. I followed up those grits with 100 or 120 and finished up with 180 to get the porch somewhat smooth, but still have enough bite to accept the primer and paint. Seeing how slowly this was progressing with the sander, I eventually bought a couple stripping wheels for my grinder to really dig into the paint and speed up the process. I removed the grinder's guard to avoid it coming into contact with the wood as the wheel wore down. As I went along, I exposed several voids in the plywood that we'll address later. I ran into a couple loosened nails that I replaced with 2-inch deck screws, and I hammered several others flush with the porch's surface. The low traffic areas at the back of the porch were in pretty good shape, so I just sanded down the top layer to level the paint and verify its stability. I used a sander and some sandpaper on a block to hit the edges and areas under the railing. After completing the heavy sanding to remove flaking paint and level the surface, I resanded the porch, progressing through the grits. Again, 60, 120, and 180. I could have waited until after I filled the gouges in the plywood, but I got in a bit of a groove with the sanding and wanted to get most of it out of the way. Next, I quickly vacuumed the porch before continuing. Alright, so now we're ready to fill the voids in the plywood. So I sanded them with 60 grit sandpaper so the wood filler would bond better. To fill the voids in the plywood, I use my preferred wood filler, which is Minwax High Performance. I absolutely love this stuff because unlike most other wood fillers, this wood filler gets mixed with a hardener, making the filler solid yet sandable. To mix and apply the Minwax filler, the directions call for a ratio of 16 parts filler to 1 part hardener. A plastic putty knife is recommended, but I prefer to use a metal flexible putty knife. The metal knife needs to be cleaned immediately after using it though. Also, it's ideal to mix only as much wood filler as can be applied in a 15-minute window, since this filler dries fully in about a half hour. While I waited for the wood filler to dry, I applied some exterior caulk my relative had left over to the stair edging to keep the water from seeping underneath it. A couple caulks I prefer to use are Big Stretch and DAP window door siding and trim. I use a DAP caulk when a quick turnaround is required since it dries in about a half hour. Since I got a little carried away with the wood filler, I gave it about an hour to dry, then sanded it using a combination of 60 grit on a block and a sander. I followed that up with 120 and 180 to finish it off. Not shown here, I vacuumed the porch one more time before moving on to primer and paint.